Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marchegiani. Today we have Bridgit Danner on the podcast. Really excited. She's got a new summit, Hormone Balance After 40, coming out in the next few weeks. So we're excited to talk about some female hormone issues and drop some serious knowledge bombs today. Bridgit, how you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Justin.
Great. Well, I know we kind of were doing a little recording earlier and got cut off, but let's continue with that question. So you did the summit, you interviewed lots of experts on female hormone issues. What were those top 3 nuggets that you gleaned from the summit? And obviously it'll be a summary, so we want everyone to tune in, and we'll put links below so people can access this great info too. But what are those couple of tidbit nuggets?
Yeah, so I'd say number one is, menopause is inevitable,
Yeah.
but your symptom level is changeable. So, it's not like, oh, well, I just have to have hot flashes or gain 20 pounds or
Totally.
get on Ambien. Like, no. So, but just like what you do in your practice, it's often getting to the root of like, how did you get into perimenopause in an imbalanced state? Are you exposed to toxins? Do you have a gut infection? Are your adrenals run down? So, it can be a tough time for women, but also a great time to like maybe I've been ignoring my health a bit as I've crushed my 30s and like raised kids. And, now it's like I'm starting to feel some things catching up to me. I want to age well. I want my hormones to be as balanced as they can. And there is a lot to be offered, and there's a lot to learn. So that's one thing. Another thing we talked about a minute ago was the good fats and oils. Wow, just if there's like one great tip I have for women in this age group is adding in some beneficial oils that help your hormone production, help your prostaglandin production. Things like borage oil and hemp oil, just things that they're not foods we eat really,
Yeah.
And even when we talk about paleo and like, yeah, great, there's some great ingredients there, but like no one eats like borage flowers or whatever. Like,
Morch oil or black currant seed oil too.
no one has those
Yeah.
things. So those can be some really beneficial supplements. One other one comes to mind is sleeping, working on improving sleep quality at this age, because it can really be disrupted as your hormones change, but yet it's so important because we're healing. And, I wrote an article like sleep is our fountain of youth, because we have all this growth hormone that happens when we sleep. So just so important to get a good night's sleep. But there's lots of other things we cover. The one talk I really liked was on metabolism, which I think is like women are just like, oh, well, I'm screwed after 40, my metabolism. But that's not really true. And that can be hacked. I was just mentioning Dr. Rita Marie Loscalzo from your town in Austin.
Yeah.
She talks about blood sugar and how balancing blood sugar is incredibly powerful as we age to, stay energetic. So yeah, lots of good options. There is hope.
Very cool. And you mentioned that first one where you're talking about the prostaglandins or the eicosanoids, which are the same thing. And we have kind of our 1, 2, and 3 pathway. The 2 is really the inflammatory, like the refined vegetable oils tend to go down that pathway. A lot of the refined meat tends to go down that pathway. And then we have the 1 and the 3, right, which you mentioned. And the 3, I think, is the big one that we hit with some of those omega-6 fats, but the healthy kind of gamma linoleic fats, the black currant, the borage oil, right? Is that correct? Kind of a good summary?
I'm trying to remember. I looked at the 3 pathways, but now I can't remember like which number is which, so to speak. But yeah, basically they're going to be balancing inflammation, anti-inflammatory, building hormones, just all the good stuff. And you need all of them. Our body is a total balancing act. Some inflammation is good. Some increase in blood pressure is good. But then you need something to balance it and like be able to bring the blood pressure back down. So yeah, those are, and fish oil too. Fish oil isn't as much like in vogue as, when everyone started taking it, 10 years ago or whatever, but it's still valuable. And it's also anti-inflammatory and sparks these pathways too.
Yeah, I think the fish oil really helps that prostaglandin 2 pathway and kind of dampen it. And then we have the 1 and the 3, which are those fats. And I see like the gamma linoleic fats, like you mentioned, they also help with hormonal acne too. So if you're a female and you have done a lot of like good diet changes, but you're still having some skin stuff, well, number one, always cross off the gut too, right? That's a really important thing. But if the gut's addressed, I see blackcurrant or the borage oil, those type of oils really help with skin health too.
And zinc, do you guys do you do
Oh,
zinc in your
oh yeah.
practice? Yeah, I'm learning more about zinc, and it's good for skin health, good for helping you make progesterone.
Yeah.
And it's in meats and stuff. And I know you're talking about a paleo diet, but it's we still could be not getting enough or not digesting enough. So how much to take? One of my friends is careful about metals. She's like, don't take too much zinc, but I think if you're going through some of these hormonal changes, you could do more like 30 milligrams zinc, really up those fatty acids and, just see how you respond.
Absolutely. I think too, if you're low in zinc, really take a peek at the hydrochloric acid levels. Make sure you're digesting those healthy meats, because meats are going to be the big source. Seafood meats. I think pumpkin seeds as well are really big in zinc as well.
Yeah, a lot of nuts and seeds.
Yeah. And a couple objective ways to even tell how you're doing with zinc is, number one, look on your blood test. Look at the alkaline phosphatase marker. If you're 50 or below, there could be a sign of zinc deficiency. And then number two is a zinc tally test. I think it's zinc chloride. It's either zinc chloride or sulfate, one of the two. But you can take a shot of that. And if it tastes metallic-y, that's a sign that you probably are zinc sufficient. If it tastes more liquid or neutral, it's a sign of your being zinc deficient, right? The better it tastes means the more you need it. The more metallic-y or the more you kind of feel repulsed by it means the less you need the zinc, meaning the more replete you are with it.
Yeah, that's one of the funnest tests to give, I think, in the clinic, because people are like, what am I doing? What am I supposed to be experiencing?
Totally.
And I've also found in my practice, like, often it's best to start with the liquid zinc to, like, once you start to absorb some, then you can switch to a pill. I'm not totally sure what it is, if it's a digestion issue, but I've just found it often works better to start with like a couple bottles of the liquid. You're not even really getting a high dose, but it seems to like absorb better. And then you can take the zinc pill.
I totally agree. And I think the only thing is to note with zinc, if you're going to go too really high, just make sure there's a tiny bit of copper in there, just so you don't throw the copper off too much, because zinc and copper are like on this seesaw. So if you go really high in zinc, it can drop the copper down. But there's a lot of people that are worried about copper toxicity anyway. So if you're going to go above 100 milligrams or so, add a tiny bit of copper in there.
Yeah, most of us are, 100 milligrams is, a lot. And most of us are getting sources of copper, but not enough of zinc.
I 100% agree. So that was tip number one with the really good omega-6 fatty acids, the healthy omega-6, not the refined vegetable oils. What's number two?
Tip from the whole summit?
Just what resonated with you the most? Because you're also a clinician. So a clinician looks at things a lot different. You're looking at things of, hey, what can I do to actually change a clinical outcome of my patients?
Well, I'll tell you something we beat up on a lot in the summit, which was wine. It's almost like become a caricature of the mid-age woman with like a glass of wine, wine with the friends, wine to come down. And I think perhaps it's like, starts as like a self-medication, like from a busy day, and like helps me sleep. And then it starts to be real consistent. And, some people listening to your show, maybe not having a couple glasses of wine every night, but they still might be having some more than they need to be because we don't really need it.
Totally.
So I think, it's a change that maybe people like don't want to make at first, but if you say like, I always say, look, don't feel like you have to do it forever. Give me a month and just say, I'm doing this for a month, and then just see what happens in your body. And see if you lose weight, see if you're thinking clearer, see if you have more energy in the morning.
Totally.
So yeah, I think that there's things in midlife that women tend to be like turning towards that we can turn away from and have, those are coping mechanisms, even coping for social situations, like, oh, I'm nervous, I gotta have this drink, it's just coping. But midlife is about expanding and like becoming more and better, not just coping. And let's tune in and like get into healthier habits, go to bed sooner, all those basics first. We can get into some more specifics perhaps, but you got to do the basics first, right? You can't be like, oh, I don't know, I can't lose weight and I'm anxious. Well, you got to take that wine out. Just try it. Take out little sweet things. Oh, that blood sugar, roller coaster, it's depleting you of nutrients that you need to make hormones. It's just making you feel off. And with midlife, maybe we can talk about what the hormones are doing midlife. There's just already a propensity, if we're not careful, to go a little off, to feel a little off. So we just kind of want to create like steadiness in our habits and body so that we can weather those changes easier.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. In Dr. Diana Schwarzwein books, she did the book, The Schwarzwein Principle, about 10 years ago.
Oh.
She's an endocrinologist out of Santa Barbara, USC grad. And she talks about women turning towards wine because there are natural polyphenols that really help modulate estrogen levels. So as you go into menopause, those ovaries aren't producing as much hormones, so the adrenals are being relied upon more, right? So the more you swing the blood sugar, the more those adrenals get whipped. But anyway, it's kind of modulating some of those estrogen receptor sites when people go into the alcohol.
I hadn't heard about that. I hadn't heard about that. But it does also like modulate serotonin, which makes us feel good in the moment.
Well, alcohol is a sugar, right? It will break down the sugar, and sugar will boost up serotonin and dopamine as well. So I think there's a lot of different things that are happening there for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's number two. I think you alluded to with the sugar as well, because when you take sugar, right, you get this hormonal adrenal roller coaster, right? Insulin on the high, cortisol on the low, meaning when your blood sugar goes up, pancreas produces insulin to push it back down, which then drives more lipogenesis and fat creation. But then when it bottoms out, then the adrenals have to pick it back up with adrenaline and cortisol, which then pull from some of your sex hormones. Can you talk more about the blood sugar roller coaster with hormones?
Yeah. So one thing is like if we're insulin resistant, our hormone receptors can get blocked up. So that's one thing. Definitely it can hurt your gut environment, bacterial imbalance, and you need your gut healthy to clear used estrogens. So even though our hormones are coming down, the estrogen is often dominant. The progesterone is falling faster because not every month we ovulate or it's not as strong. So we need our gut healthy to clear estrogen. I was just doing some research recently, and even just like one drink a day can give you SIBO. And yeah, like it's just you can't feed that stuff. You really need that. Gut health came up a lot in the summit, and that healthy gut. I find in our clients too. We just took on a group of clients with our coaching program, and man, the stuff we're finding in their guts, all sorts of things.
Totally.
So it can be hard to make that connection between the gut and hormones, but it's going on, it's happening. So if you can nourish that gut and not feed it sugars, that's one way to clear. What else? I think that most sugary foods, are devoid of nutrients, and they're hard on your pancreas and your insulin, but they're also hard on your liver, to be processing and dealing with that. And you need your liver healthy to be, doing its job of clearing hormones and all that stuff. So yeah, avoiding toxins, whether it's your food being toxic or your body cream or your perfume or your, carpet cleaner, just totally. Really cutting down on all that stuff. Kind of segueing to another topic, but that came up a lot too. It's just like, maybe it's time to say, even if you think, well, this stuff never bothered me before, but now if you're having hormonal symptoms, it's time to reassess.
That makes a lot of sense. So hormones are really affected by a lot of these toxins because a lot of these toxins are essentially xenoestrogens, right? Xeno means foreign, estrogen is an estrogen hormone. So if we're getting impacted by xenoestrogens in the environment through pesticides, through chemicals, cleaning products, that can really affect our hormones, can it?
Yeah, very much so. And, also our fat tissue can make extra estrogen too, or we make more fat tissue as a place to store toxins that our liver can't handle processing because it's, so busy with handling everything else. So it's sort of a connection between the toxins and the fat tissue, and women in this age really are concerned about gaining weight at this age as well. So yeah, cleaning up your habits. Nowadays there's so many options. and there were in the old days too, but there's been a resurgence of like clean, clean hand soap without fragrance. And, one, I mentioned carpet cleaner, like, it's funny sometimes where you forget to look. Like at our old house, we had this carpet cleaner, and I just buy like the standard mix that you stick in there. And I realized, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Like, this is full of chemicals. I thought, where in the world will I ever go to get like a natural carpet cleaner soap? And it was like 1 mile away in my natural grocery store. So sometimes it's like you just forget to check certain things, but start checking, start looking at your labels. I'm really hitting home to eat organic as much as possible. And those little treats and cheats we do, those are often where we're getting exposed to the most toxins. Like, if you have a little cheat and have something like a cookie, that wheat may have been sprayed with glyphosate, and that's like very toxic to your gut that we talked about. It's like an antibiotic for your gut. So and it sounds like a lot of work to be like, oh, I have to be so clean and pure, and this sounds horrible. But just, do it like an experiment, and also know like you're worth it. It's not like, oh, I have to be healthy. Like it's the worst thing ever. It's like you can very much be happy enjoying a healthy lifestyle, as you and I do, because you have more mental power. It's like you're more comfortable honestly with yourself, and you're getting a good night's sleep, and your moods are more balanced. Like you just like life can like be anything you want when you're healthy, but when you're just coping and having a cookie and coffee and whatnot, then you're just getting by, and it's gonna catch up to you too. When we had one of our speakers talk about heart disease and cancer, and sadly, like those are around the corner when we're in our 40s. They could happen. Things could happen sooner, but I think like when I was in my 30s, those just sound like concepts that were so far away. Right. But they're coming for you if you're not careful. So midlife is a great time to get in better habits, because nobody wants to be, in the doctor's office talking about their heart disease, or could it be cancer? Nobody wants that.
Yeah. I mean, when you're dealing with for me on the patient side, because I'm interacting with lots of patients every week, we always talk about getting people to a baseline level of health, because once people get there, the little bit of cheating that they do on the other side of the fence may throw them out of that performance zone for days, where the reward you get for here just is not worth that momentary few minutes or maybe an hour worth of pleasure, right? So number 2 is figure out what that thing you want over here is. Let's say it's alcohol. Well, there's different versions of alcohol. Not all alcohol is the same, right? I think it's Dry Creek wines. They got really good wine that's going to be low on the mycotoxin, low on all of the crap and the excipients added, and also very low on the sugar. So if you want a wine, there are healthy versions of wine, healthy versions of alcohol, healthy versions of treats that will give you that mouthfeel, that pleasure, but not take you out of that performance zone for very long.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I've tried those wines, and they give me a headache in like 3 sips. It doesn't work for me. And it might just be the sugars. I know they say 0 sugar. I think that's what they say with the Dry Creek wines, but that wasn't my experience drinking. So,
and for me too, I'm in the same place. I normally get headaches. I typically don't do wine. I do a sparkling champagne, or I do hard alcohol Tito's vodka with kombucha, ginger kombucha, and I make my own little Moscow Mule out of that. So those are my 2 favorites. So I agree. Not a big wine person outside of the sparkling.
Yeah, there's different options. I mean, I recently got my gut retested, and I have some candida there. And, I don't have overt symptoms, but I think the way I react to sugar and alcohol, I'm like, well, that's the candida is loving it up as soon as it comes in my mouth. So got to listen to your body too. And yeah, don't just listen to me and Dr. Justin. Like, just, as I say, just try stuff, try giving up wine for a month. And if, then try it, bring it back in and see, what your limit is. Like, what is, too, and not that I never, ever have a drink, but it's pretty rare, because I just don't want to deal with the repercussions. So maybe like once a month. But everybody's going to find their different thing. But I think to clean up and say it's temporary and it's something I'm doing for my health to experiment, then you get to be the owner of deciding how much you bring back.
Absolutely. And then tip number 2 with that too is don't drink alcohol in an empty stomach, because that will, a little bit of protein and fat in there will slow down that absorption, so it won't spike your blood sugar or hit your liver as hard. And then number 2, some activated charcoal is phenomenal to kind of buffer out some of those toxic burden too.
Oh, like after in the evening or?
Yeah, I mean, I'll typically take it along with it. And then a lot of times
Oh,
too, I'll take in my line, I use liver supreme, which is like milk thistle and some extra B vitamins, so you get some herbs to tonify the liver a bit, and then some extra B vitamins, which, your body will burn up to actually help detoxify the alcohol. That's why a lot of alcoholics are deficient in B1.
oh, interesting. I'll piggyback that and say I use charcoal or clay. Like if I ate something that made me feel bloated, and I've been telling that one to my clients because it's like, yeah, we want to avoid those things that make us feel bloated, but sometimes we accidentally have them, and then so those two things really help me to take in the evening if I'm feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. Even conventional medicine. I mean, I went to an ER college roommate many years back, OD'd on alcohol. And at the ER, I mean, they had him drinking a whole cup of activated charcoal in liquid form in the ER.
Oh
So
my
even
gosh.
the ER is still on top of the stuff. Conventional medicine is.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So getting back to the female hormone stuff, what's tip number 3 for you? Oh, by the way, we got some questions lined up. So once we go through a couple more, we'll go through a rapid answer kind of Q&A.
Okay. Let's see. Some other things that came up on the summit, I would say, are like spacing out your eating came up. Having like a longer time between dinner and breakfast, not snacking, again, kind of for blood sugar and also for gut. There's certain bacteria, I can't remember what it's called, but it needs a long, like 12-hour period to rebuild itself. So having that space with the gut. What else did we talk about? We talked a little bit about keto and, having that high fat diet, not being afraid of fats. Something interesting that came up in that talk was fiber, and that it's irritating. So, thinking like you need a ton of salads and vegetables or grains or whatever, if it's irritating you, but you can eat some rich foods like liver, that actually, whole concept for some people to be trying on. But that came up. I'm gonna pull up my speaker thing. I'm not always the greatest at remembering like tips like on my like from my brain, but let me try to see some of who our speakers were.
Cool.
And some fun things we talked about.
Yeah. So while you're doing that too, let's hit up some questions. So off the bat, Diana wants to know, do grains, of course, grain-free, of course, do grains, I think she means gluten-free. So I think she's referring to like corn and rice, increase bad estrogens. Why do some people do so well on grains? I don't.
That's a great question. So I think we could say that it's possible that some grains could push that. I'll let you chime in on this, Justin.
Yeah. I would say off the bat, there's a higher level of gluten sensitivity genetically with yourself, Diana. That's going to create more inflammation and more leaky gut. That's number one. The more inflammation that goes on there, that's going to take your hormones out of balance, because with the more inflamed you are, cortisol is going to increase, insulin may be out of balance, and that may skew your progesterone to estrogen ratio, because you'll pull progesterone downstream to anti-inflammatory cortisol, so that can create more estrogen dominance. Also, a lot of grains are going to be contaminated with mycotoxins and can increase LPS in the gut. And the more lipopolysaccharide that's there as well, that can potentially increase beta-glucuronidase, which is an enzyme that deconjugates metabolized estrogen and it puts it back into circulation. So the more inflammatory foods, the more foods that feed dysbiosis or bad bacteria, increases beta-glucuronidase, which can deconjugate. So conjugation is nothing more than a hormone with a straitjacket around it, so typically a protein, and that beta-glucuronidase opens it up and allows it to go back into circulation, which can affect your hormones. So for sure.
Yeah, that's probably a lot more detailed than I would have said. I would say, they could potentially irritate your gut and create some inflammation. I even wonder if some of them could, like we talked about those prostaglandin pathways earlier. I wonder if some of them could push like some of those more inflammatory pathways. And then I think like with things like stress, chronic stress, your gut lining can be thinner and not as robust, and then things are more irritating too. And then the quantities, it's really easy to overeat grains and their carbs and then that sugar, and like the fat tissue produces more estrogen, or the inflammation is blocking the receptors.
Yep.
So yeah, I think for women in midlife, just really finding that ratio in their diets, like what is like enough carbs, and what is like a serving size, or, how many drinks or whatever is like enough that pushes me over where I feel kind of bloated and might not clear in my head anymore. So I think finding that ratio is really important. And still a lot of women aren't having enough protein, not enough protein in the morning. You talk about this in your talk on the summit. Yeah, just getting like those whole animal, like cooking a whole chicken, getting that like robust, variety of fats. And I think it's okay to have some, like we talked about, the nuts and seeds, oils too. We do some seed cycling. We have like a blog people can find, our June seed cycling challenge. And people really do well with that. Partly the fiber and partly the oils and those nuts and seeds can be helpful.
Absolutely. Totally. And next up here, is there a relationship between cholesterol, high cholesterol, and menopause?
Yeah. So I've kind of heard two things, or would say two things. One is that we need cholesterol to make hormones. So sometimes it's rising up like naturally to produce more hormones in this time. But then our keto speaker would say, if you're not consuming enough cholesterols, your body will be forced to make more cholesterol. So we want to kind of avoid that by giving our body good cholesterols. Well, say the question again. Is there a correlation in general?
Is there a relationship with just menopause occurring and higher cholesterol?
I think there is an occurrence with it, but I think it's all, if you feel like your cholesterol is getting out of range, and those ranges are like debatable. But, our speaker on heart health said, the quickest way to heart disease is through sugar. So it's more like body's getting inflamed from the sugar, and the cholesterol is kind of increasing to repair it. So I think to some extent, cholesterol could go up at this age naturally, but if it's like sky high and your diet is very poor and full of sugars, that could be something to look at.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if your diet isn't quite in check and there's some insulin resistance going on, that will get worse over time. And insulin does drive that hemomethylglutarate-CoA reductase enzyme that stimulates cholesterol synthesis. We can't forget that the majority of cholesterol is made by your liver. Typically, insulin's going to drive it. So if you have a poor diet, doesn't have insulin in check, that's one vector. A second vector, there could be a subclinical thyroid issue, and low thyroid function will cause cholesterol to go up.
That's a good point. Yeah, and this is the most common time to be diagnosed is menopausal, but second to that is perimenopausal, postpartum. I think puberty is in there. I don't work with that age group as much, but yeah, every time the hormones change and the estrogen can be dominant. Think about after you have a baby, estrogen is very high because you're not cycling. It's not as high as, in other times, but there's an imbalance. There's other things we could talk about too, but when the estrogen is like affecting, estrogen being high and relative to progesterone is affecting your immune system, and it could be an autoimmune thyroid, or it could be just an estrogen dominant type thyroid condition. So that was a great point, Justin.
Totally. And I think the last piece of that puzzle is, does it even matter if your cholesterol is high? So my criteria is, number one, if your cholesterol is over 300, maybe we got to take a look at it. Number two is, do we have elevations in inflammatory markers, CRP, homocysteine, fibrinogen? Okay, if those are high, maybe we got to take a look at it. Number three is, how's your HDL, the total cholesterol ratio? Is it greater than 5? If it's greater than 5, then maybe we got to look at it. And then last but not least is, how's your trig to HDL ratio? If it's 2 or below, then it's probably okay. So it's not, cholesterol is never just a cut and dry number. You got to look at it. I see a lot of people with high cholesterol also have kick-ass HDL. So then their HDL, the total cholesterol ratio, is really rock solid.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope that helps. The
Next is 47-year-old, strict keto, 4 years, overtrained, undernourished, and 40 pounds overweight. She has yeast overgrowth, thyroid are low, all sex hormones are low, blood sugar is rising. What should she address first? She wants to address the gut first. Your thoughts? And this is her practitioner, NPs, or a practitioner that wants to address the gut first.
She's asking if that's the best choice, that's the best,
or what kind of sequencing thing. I think. And I have my opinion, but I want you to go first.
Yeah, we talked about this somewhat on the summit, and a few people said, we'll see what you think, Justin. I can't remember what you said on your interview. So some people say they work on the hormones first just to give a little relief and a little more energy. And then they start doing some of the painful work, so to speak, which is the gut and the liver detox and where some symptoms are going to come up. Does it have to be that? Well, let me think what we do in our practice. I mean, we're a little bit all mixed together. Yeah. But, I wouldn't say you want to go after the gut in a really intense way till your body's strong enough to like handle it. So those detox pathways are clear. So sometimes we start with some gentle detox, get the foundations going. Like I'll mention briefly, like I was saying, I don't know if I said this in the first time we were interviewing, maybe. So anyway, at this time last year, I was having a lot of trouble with spotting, and I was also exposed to toxic mold. So I was like, I don't think I'll ever get my hormones right till I get the mold piece right. I have gotten a lot better with the mold, but I feel that you still can actually cut past some of those things and address the hormones with like the one I mentioned before, like the hemp oil and the flax oil and the fish oil, and maybe so yeah, I do think you can kind of massage some of those symptoms, because healing the gut takes a while. So might as well get some loving in there. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So when I hear that though, and I hear addressing the gut, there's a kind of a double-edged side of it, right? So when I address the gut, there's 6 R's that we go through. Number 1 is removing the bad foods, right? That's totally okay. We can check that one off.
Anytime.
Number 2, replacing enzymes and acids so we can digest the foods better. That's number 2. Check. Yes, we can do that. Number 3 is replacing, or I should say repairing the gut lining, nutrients to help with the gut lining repair and helping to deal with the inflammation in the gut, and then also helping to repair the adrenals, the thyroid, and some of the hormonal issues first. So those are the first 3 R's: remove, replace, repair. Okay, so that we can do those first. Now, I think when people talk about addressing gut, they tend to go to the 4th R, which is removing the infection or the dysbiosis, whatever the critters are. So I always wait at least a month or 2 for that, because if detox isn't good and hormones aren't good and blood sugar and immune's not good, that can really create a lot more stress that your body may not have the ability to deal with. And you only have 1 or 2 months with a patient for them to start seeing something. And if they start moving backwards for 1 or 2 months, you're going to lose them and you're not going to be able to help them as a clinician. Now, that's just my personal take based on.
Yeah, no, it's so individual with every person. And yeah, you have to kind of start with the most obvious things in front. I don't know who the name of this room, but just resting, just resting your body. And we have some great talks on like mindset and emotional health, which is an important part of health too. If you overdid it and you're reassessing like the direction of your health, the direction of your life, like just resting, just reading books, like laying in the sun, going on vacation, those things are very healing as well. So
Totally.
just remember to keep that in your protocol, so to speak.
Getting that parasympathetic nervous system going. And I think that has to be part of any functional medicine program at the foundational level, is the sleep, the good healthy habits, the time to relax. So yeah, that's a really good point. We don't want to overlook that.
Yeah.
Can detoxifying the liver bring your hormone balance back?
That's an easy one. To a large part, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. I think as long as your hormones are decent, like you have good constitution in the gland, I think that may be enough. But if there's a lot of dysfunction in the adrenals or the thyroid, that will help, but then maybe we need to support the other side as well. So I think it totally can, for sure though.
Yeah. It's an important system that a few people mentioned on the summit. And yeah, it's not the only piece. Nothing ever is just one piece. But yeah, again, like you said, just removing all the toxins is important too. Like before you go into, taking the herbs or doing a coffee enema, like just make sure you've got them out of your diet and out of your home, out of your water supply, to just reduce that burden.
Yeah, I think you already echoed it. Our body will detoxify better just by not putting toxins in. When we think of detoxifying, we're giving something to help detoxify, but we can also just think about it. Let's just not add the stuff as well. And then you mentioned earlier with the fatty liver, the one of the major stressors on your liver is excess carbohydrates and insulin, because that will cause a fatty liver, which will slow down the filtration too.
Yeah, which is gross to even think about. Fat clumps
I
in your
know.
liver blocking up everything.
I know. Absolutely. Next, estrogen dominant is related to histamine. HIT is related to methylation. I think she means histamine as well. After addressing diet and gut health, bacteria, parasites, and yeast, we still have ED plus HIT. So I think ED means estrogen dominance. HIT means histamine intolerance. Then what can we do besides working on methylation?
I'm trying to make sure I got all that
It's a little
question.
convoluted with all the abbreviations. I think what they're saying is, hey, I have estrogen dominance and I have a histamine issue. I've already worked on the gut. What else can I do besides pushing my detox methylation pathways? That's my translation.
I think you can think about hormone production. So I think you can think about what we talked about before, the fats and oils. You can, depending on your age, like I would do more like Vitex with like a little younger, early 40s, but any time in the 40s, 50s, doing like maca or adaptogenic herbs, like if you can pull everything up, pull the progesterone up, it'll help balance the estrogen. So I think that that's an important piece that does sometimes get missed because our American culture is always thinking about clearing and detoxing. But I don't know if this person's had their hormone system, but most of us are also depleted at this age. So just pulling hormone production up, you could see that estrogen become more in balance.
Yep, I totally agree. The only thing I would say, well, I think you really said it all. Potentially add in some progesterone, maybe even some pregnenolone and DHEA. But looking at the adrenals too is an important piece. As well.
You can do some things like maca and borage oil, super easy on your own. But yeah, with a practitioner, you could do some supplemental progesterone.
Yes.
Get some testing for that kind of thing. I do well on progesterone. I don't do as well on DHEA, pregnenolone from my experience. Everybody's kind of different.
And that I see that too with people that have kind of more backed up liver pathways too.
That might have been.
And maybe the mold, because you mentioned your mold experience, maybe that was a driving factor with that.
Yeah, back when I tried those, I was living in mold but didn't know. So it's kind of flavored my whole history of so it's interesting. And I think that, we haven't talked about that. There can be these hidden things. You talk a lot about parasites and those hidden infections, but I've had to learn a lot about mold and Epstein-Barr virus and all these things that I was hosting that I didn't know about. And those things can really flare up with the changing hormones and not getting a good night's sleep. And we talked a little bit about how that high estrogen can affect the immune system in not a favorable way. And then just with aging, the immune system can be deteriorating in a sense. So a lot things can come up. If you feel like you've tried everything and you're still sick, this is my personal lesson. It's there's probably something else going on to look for.
Totally. That makes sense. What do you think about supplementing with DIM post menopause?
I think it could be done. I guess it's to clear some bad estrogen, so to speak. Is that what the person's thinking?
Yeah. I'm kind of a little perplexed as well, but maybe the detox pathways aren't running and they're trying to support the liver and such. But most people are going to have lower estrogens, especially if they're, not adding in a whole bunch of xenoestrogens as well. So definitely makes more sense with the cycling female though, right?
Yeah. It's again, depends on issue. I think DIM is great for PCOS. It gets used a lot, or in some estrogen dominance cases. Also that CDG I've learned about just in the last year that can help. In my own body, what's been more effective is to build more hormone. And maybe that won't be in everyone's case. Maybe that's just mine. And you can get tested. We have one, Maria Claps talks about the importance of testing at any age. And occasionally women will be older but still have high estrogen. And that's something to figure out and learn about. It's just to see what pathways too. I think you run the Dutch test too, and just to see I'm just curious about this caller, what are her symptoms that she feels like maybe she has high estrogen, maybe she's worried about. cancers in our family or something like that. So yeah, I would say, yeah, maybe, but this would maybe want more information, or maybe it'll be good for this person to test.
I think you're right. I think getting the test done, and I think getting some more information on what the symptoms are that make them think they need it would be really key.
Yeah.
Next
Fun
is
questions.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, we're hitting it. Next is, without getting an organic acid test, is there a kind of a universal protocol supplement that can be taken for hormonal balance? What do you take personally?
Well, I keep saying the same stuff over and over, so it's boring for people, but for me, definitely the oils has helped a lot. Magnesium, I love for this age group. I love in my own body. I use a magnesium chelate, and I like adore it, because I was getting leg cramps and stuff. It just helps me like prevent like menstrual migraines, menstrual cramps. I take a good quality multivitamin that has the zinc and has the methylated B vitamins. And I'll tell you a funny story. Like, I got my hair analyzed like this winter, and I got the results back before I knew how to read them. And in my like novice opinion, I was like, oh, my magnesium is like so high, I better like stop taking. I had a few things look high, so I stopped taking everything. Oh my gosh, my cycle was so much worse that month. So it really made me see like getting a good quality source of B vitamins. B vitamins were very important to spark a bunch of things with ovulation and hormones. Getting that is important. Taking an extra high dose, I think, of magnesium. Most women need like 600 to 800 milligrams, and get in a good form. I just had a new client, and she's been taking magnesium for years. I can't remember what form she's taking, but
oxide or citrate.
Yeah, something that I think it was oxide. Yeah. She's not getting anything out of it. It's like, you just got to switch your magnesium. So I love magnesium. I love fish oil. I mentioned you don't need a lot, but a little bit of borage oil or hemp oil. I eat a lot of nuts and seeds in my diet too, and I think they help me for hormones.
Yeah.
One other thing, we talked a bit about zinc, that if you're not getting much zinc, it might be something you want to up the supplementation on. Yep. What other supplements do you like, Justin?
I think you already said the foundational things that aren't even related to female hormones, which I think is people overlook that, right? So that what you said is totally foundation. Now to add on top of that, Chase Tree or Vitex is going to be great for almost any female, especially if they're cycling. If they're more menopausal, you can go more into specific phenotypes of maca. It's a great product that I use and carry in my store called Feminescence. And they have a great type of maca for cycling females and a great type of maca for menopausal females. And it works phenomenal for a lot of the cycling issues, and then also a lot of the hot flashes. Because remember, hot flashes, especially if they happen at night, they screw up women's sleep. And then if their sleep screwed up, then their blood sugar is screwed up, and that throws everything off. So I like the maca and the Chase Tree depending on what's going on.
Yeah, no, I have some, I use sleep aids or like anxiety aids, right now with this stomach a lot. Totally. Yeah. And I think that's okay too at this age group. Like, don't just like try to bear it, if you need to sleep. So, take some 5-HTP, or like one trick I learned from my Ayurvedic practitioner is like do some warm almond milk with a half teaspoon of nutmeg. That's really calming at night. What else do I take? Like, I have like an herbal one with like valerian and stuff like that. That's just calming. So I have a whole bunch of like different little remedies depending on the day. And that doesn't exactly sound like it's about hormones, but it kind of is, because you need that good night's sleep to like get your hormones stabilized.
Huge. What do you eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, Bridgit?
Oh, I love it. So this morning I had chia pudding, and I had it with some coconut flakes, walnuts,
nice,
and raisins on top. I was out of fresh fruit. So I'm allergic to eggs, so I don't, that makes it a little different for me in the morning. Sometimes I do a sausage, like a little frozen organic sausage. Occasionally I'll have like a soup for breakfast, like this can be super easy, keep a box of broth in your fridge and like a thing of quinoa and some greens. Sometimes I'll have that. What else? I'm giving a few breakfast ideas because I think it's a hard one for folks. I do smoothies sometimes. Sometimes tell people just you do trail mix or do a hard-boiled egg. So get some protein. I really avoid carbs in the morning. That's very important to me. But I do have carbs, usually a lunch and dinner.
Yep.
For lunch, I sometimes have leftovers. I love working from home because I can throw things together. Like if I have some leftover rice, stir fry some vegetables. Like yesterday I had like a chicken sausage I had laying around. I definitely just like kind of put stuff together for a pretty healthy lunch. Which, yeah, I love that option. And then for dinner, we usually have something like a piece of fish or chicken, often an animal protein, and then some green stuff, steamed broccoli, or I put a lot of fat in everything. So my steamed broccoli is going to have hemp oil all over it. I put hemp oil. Yeah, I put hemp oil on my lunch. I put hemp oil, I'm putting oils everywhere, nuts everywhere. Lots of nuts and seeds. And then maybe we'll have like sweet potato fries. So we do some potato, some rice or quinoa are pretty much like the carbs that I would eat.
Yeah.
What else? Yeah, that's kind of the theme.
Excellent. I think you're rock solid. 2 other questions. We'll hit them rapid fire. Does it matter if adaptogens are in pill form or powder form? It depends. Certain female hormone issues or tonics, I do find sometimes giving the liquid tincture-based herbs can make them a little more potent. Your take on that? Do you agree or no?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that tinctures feel strong, but if you'll take them, it's mostly like what you'll take. I bought all this like powdered maca and stuff to make these like elixir drinks. I don't like them. I don't like the powder in them. So to some extent, but I do have a maca powder I put in a smoothie. Effectiveness, efficacy, I'm not totally sure if, I'd have to research that, but I do think it's important to take what you're going to take and have a variety. Like I'm willing to take pills. I'm pretty okay with it, but it's nice to also have some things that are liquid, some things that you can rub on. Like I feel, especially with my mold thing, I really learned like it can get exhausting and so expensive to take so many supplements. And if there's something you can do that's in another form, I'm really holding on to that a lot tighter lately. So I would just tell the caller, as far as efficacy, maybe I don't have a great answer, but I like things in all sorts of forms. And I think it's good to experiment.
Yeah, I think it's totally good to individualize. Last question. Cortisol is normal except spikes that are very high around 3 to 5 p.m. So this person wants to know, is that adrenal fatigue stage 2? Again, I think we need the whole test to see it, to know where the cortisol levels are at. Stage 2 is typically relatively normal cortisol levels with aberrations in rhythm and lower DHEA in general. So I think we're missing some info. Any comments?
The thing that came to me, and I'm not an Ayurvedic practitioner, but is it Vata, the wind one? That imbalances in the afternoon. And that's the time I feel imbalanced too. And a lot of people have this wind imbalance because we're so busy nowadays and we're doing so much stuff. So that's like a real key time of day for me to rest. And that can be tough because it's like the end of your day or you're going to pick up your kids. But I would encourage this person to like tune in to like how that time of day feels for them and like what are they doing, what are the stimulants, or like just are they eating a certain snack always right before that spike or in a certain stress trigger, or maybe the body's just trying to like pick them up from a slump. I'm not sure, but I think it's something interesting there with the 3 to 5.
Yeah, I think potentially a blood sugar drop. If they had their lunch around 11 or 12, maybe their blood sugar's dropping. So maybe a little mini meal, maybe schedule a meditation in there, maybe keep some adaptogens kind of in your system during that time of the day. A couple options.
I have to eat at that time of day. Like it's not optional for me. And the more I eat, the better. I mean, maybe I should have my dinner there. Maybe someday I'll evolve to eating that early of a dinner. But if I have a real heavy snack, my blood sugar is just drop. And I don't snack constantly, but that's probably the one snack a day that is not optional for me.
Got it. Perfect. Very good. Well, again, closing up here, we got the Hormone Balance After 40 Summit. We'll put information below in the YouTube description and the podcast description. So make sure you check out that summit. 40 or 30 or so great people are going to be there. I'm going to be there on one of the first days. So make sure you tune in to see
Day
me.
one, June 5th, this guy.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Very cool. Well, any other questions, comments, or concerns, anything else you want to address for the listeners or
No, I think it was a lot of fun. You know, I'm always not always best like on my toes, but it's good for me to try to hang with it. They were really great questions, and it was always fun with you, Dr. Justin.
Thank you. And what's that summit URL link again?
After 40 Summit, and it's the number 40.
After 40, the number 40 Summit, SUMMIT, 1 T?
Yes.
Good.
2 M's, 1 T. Should come up.
1 T. Perfect. Love it, Bridgit. Well,
Bye,
thank you so
everyone.
much for the great information. You have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.